did that get you ready for your successes in college and the pros?
Well, I think the diversity of New York City, the melting pot of people, the melting pot of activities, and the melting pot of players kind of gave me a bigger perspective of what to expect. I wasn't shocked that there was great players like in other places, or shocked that there were different dialects and things of that nature. Everything was kind of known, and I think that helps you when you kind of know the road that you're about to hit. And when you're always surprised by things, I think that's difficult. So if anything that New York helped, it was the melting pot of all of those things.
There had to be a culture shock then to go to North Carolina and play for Dean Smith.
No, not really, because Raleigh-Durham, the Research Triangle area, is probably 150,000 students between North Carolina, that school in Durham. I don't never say that name. North Carolina State, Johnson C. Smith. So it's so many young kids in 18 to 25 from all over the country that are in such a small radius. Predominantly they're North Carolinians, but you can always find someone from from my area I grew up that was in some school there, or people that were from other countries. So it's different. I always say that the Research Triangle is just in the South. It's not particularly the South in terms of all the time.
Speaking of that, of a Carolina school, how do you feel Zion is going to do this season?
Well, I think Zion is interesting because he's going to be the guy who's going to have to find a niche, because what he doesn't exist. It didn't exist. Kind of like Magic Johnson. There was no 6'9" point guard before he came along. There was no Charles Barkley. There was no 6'5" power forward. It didn't exist. So they created a niche that didn't exist. He's going to have to do that because the way he plays, there's no one in the history of the game that plays that way. So he'll be the first that we see play that way, whatever that way that is. He created that niche in college, and now he has to do it in the NBA.
And how do you feel about as well? How do you feel about the Dallas Mavericks just with Luka moving forward, and obviously the Kristaps acquisition? Do you feel that as a good duo moving forward? Do you expectations should Mavs fans expect?
Health is everything.
Yeah.
With Porzingis, his health is everything. If he comes back any resemblance of what he was, and continues to mature, that's going to be that would be a great duo because I feel they complement each other. I think Kristaps plays somewhat like Dirk on the perimeter first, even though he can go inside, and then Luka handling the basketball with the ball in his hands. It could be a pretty formidable duo in the next 5 years, 7 years. They could change the landscape of what people are thinking, who the best teams are in the West, if Porzingis is healthy.
Sure. What were your thoughts on what happened to Toronto with Kawhi leaving and going to the Clippers? What do you think about that?
I'm never startled anymore by free agency. I'm more startled by trades. Free agency now is like college recruitment. You think you have a guy, you think he's going to be there, you think he's going to stay in your I think it's almost like 50%, not 50%, 40% of freshmen transfer in college basketball. It's the same. So free agency no longer surprises me, but trades do. And the Russell Westbrook and Paul George trade, basically from Oklahoma, that surprised me. They were basically saying that we give up on this run. You had Kevin Durant, then you had James Harden, then Kevin Durant, and now Russell. So now it's a new era of something we've never seen in Oklahoma. So that surprised me more than anything.
Going back to the Mavs and Luka, obviously he had a huge rookie year. What do you think is possible in year 2 for him?
I think for him, his maturation, if he probably looked at things he needs to work on, just from outside looking in, He's a dynamic passer, dynamic player. I think that his improvement areas that he probably worked on this summer is get into the area of the floor off the dribble more, being a little bit more elusive instead of overpowering all the time, because at times they're going to put bigger players on him. I think more of a consistent three-point shooter. It's probably the two things that, just as an analyst, I would say, which he should have a natural maturation of. If he improves those things, he's going to take that next step to possibly being an all-star.
Who was the best player you played with or against, college and pro? It could be the same person.
Well, Michael Jordan in college. Michael Jordan, no. And Hakeem Olajuwon and Michael Jordan in pros. I think that 2-year run, what Michael was able to do for 8 to 9 years, Hakeem did in those 2 years that I played when we won championships. He was the most dominant player in basketball, without question. He put fear in people just like Michael did. This is when you know you're really good, when you put fear in players that you don't guard. Like point guards were afraid where he was, and same thing with Michael, Centers were like, where's Michael Jordan? And he's not guarding you. So for me, I think that's what Hakeem did. So those two guys, best I've ever played with.
What would you take away from playing for Dean Smith?
A lot. A lot of there wasn't things were off and on the court. There wasn't an adult decision I probably didn't make without just touching base with him. Hey, I'm about to do this. What do you think? From relationships to buying a house, it was, after the fact. So a lot of off the court stuff. I always tell former players that play when they talk about other coaches that they have now. I'm like, you guys, you can't compare your coach to Coach Smith. I was like, it was like playing for Gandhi. If Gandhi was a basketball coach, or if Nelson Mandela was a basketball coach, it was Dean Smith. His philosophy of thought for others is just on another level of extremity. So that's what I understood, how he could be able to take 12 players and treat them exactly the same, regardless of skill set.
And then Bill Russell was your first coach.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
What was that like?
It was great because I got to sit next to him on the plane. As a rookie, my seat was next to his. He made it. He said I had to sit next to him on the bus and the plane. So I heard all of the Boston Celtics stories. I heard all of the civil rights stories. And he was just he's a national treasure in terms of information and a wealth of information. So for me, sitting next to him, hearing stories about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and then you go and Tommy Heinsohn and John Havlicek and all of the greats that played. It was like sitting next to a national treasure.
Do you guys have as much fun as it looks at TNT?
More. More. It continues. It continues way before we get to the. He works at Roe Parish. He works at Turner, so he knows what I'm talking about. So it starts way before we even get onto the set, hours before. And if we're in the same hotel, then it's even, when we're on the road, it's even more. But yeah, it's a continuation. So what you see is kind of like what's been happening an hour for. Then, we go on air and it just continues and it go back on air. So the conversation sometimes comes from the back and it comes and bleeds onto the show. And then people are like, well, that has nothing to do with basketball. Like, yeah, because we were talking about that earlier, so we're going to get it on the air.
As well, Melo has been a massive NBA off topic this offseason.
Yeah.
Lots of people saying, going forward, say he's blackballed, so he just doesn't fit in the league anymore. How do you feel about it?
The league is very a copycat league. It's very a perception-oriented league. I remember when foreign players was coming in to the NBA, there was a big prejudice against foreign players just because of perception. Oh, they can't play here. We looked last year, international players won predominantly most of the awards last year. So there's always been that type of prejudice thought about a perception. And Melo now fits a perception that he can't play in the league, which is not true. There were 75 to 100 guys when they got signed. I was like, why didn't you sign Melo? Like, I just in my mind. There's a lot of good teams that he can play for and help. So I would say he probably has 2 to 3 years still left in his arsenal. But their expectation also is for him to take them over the hump and to put them in a championship position. And that perception is either right or wrong, but also the fact that what I always hear is, well, will he accept? But you play, you have to accept. You don't have a choice. If a coach plays you, he plays you. If he doesn't, he doesn't. So, I don't know. I don't even know what that means. Can someone accept something? It's like, can a coach sit him? Yeah, he can sit him. It's his job to be a coach.
Do you expect someone to pick someone up?
I would hope. I'm a Carmelo Anthony fan, so I would hope that they picks him up. I can name the Spurs. He would fit in. He would fit in right away. The Lakers, he'd fit in. Fit in Brooklyn. He would fit in. Just off the top of my head, without even like doing any research, because I'm a fan, but not that big a fan to think of every team. But this, right off the bat, I could name 5 teams, that he would fit in.
What do you think the biggest challenges are facing the league in the next 5 years?
Challenges? I don't know if there's challenges, but the growth is so rapid to pay attention to the small details. The growth every year, I was in Europe for the last couple of weeks, and the growth internationally is just astronomical. And I said this over there, I no longer think of Giannis or Luka as international players. I just say they're basketball players. I don't go, the international player, Giannis. No, I don't think of it that way. There was a time when I would see guys and say, he's an international player. There was a distinct style, a distinct strength, and a distinct weakness that international players had, and they were very identifiable. Now, it's a global game. Everyone plays the same. And I was saying, it's funny I'm here, because I kept saying, they were like, well, we have international players. I was like, well, if you go to Dallas and you say Dirk Nowitzki's an international player, they would argue. Like, no, he grew up, he's been in Dallas longer than he's been out of the country. He's been in Dallas 20 years, And so I don't think that no one looks at Dirk and say he's an international player. They go, he's Dallas Mavericks, Dirk Nowitzki.
I know Charles came out for the last game. What do you think of Dirk's career just overall?
It was a great career. Not too many guys play on one team anymore with free agency. No one commits that kind of commitment as ownership through different ownership groups as well. He's a Hall of Famer, obviously, and probably one of the top 10 players at his position that ever played.
You had a 10-year career in the NBA as a player, but what made you want to continue your professional basketball career, but from a different perspective?
As an announcer, well, it was kind of I kind of fell into it a little bit. My wife at the time was a broadcaster, and I used to critique her. She was doing the news in Arkansas, and she had just started out, and I used to go, oh, okay. She's like, record me and just like see what you see, and I used to critique her, and I write it down, and she'd come home and I'd pass it to her. And then I started learning about it. She's like, you could do it if you really want to. And then I had an opportunity with Turner. They used to bring players on, and they said, hey, if you really want to do this, you'd be pretty good at it. And I never thought of it as a career at that point until that moment. And when they heard I was going to retire, they actually called me, because I didn't seek them out. And they called me and said, if you want to do it, you can start. And that was 20 years ago, and here I am, still doing it.
There was a lot of rumblings about you potentially getting into coaching as well. Is that something that you still would consider, or are you comfortable with
I think coaching front office, is definitely in the cards at some point. Just the wealth of information that you acquire and relationships over 20 years sometimes gets, not used if you're just doing the same job. I'm having a lot of fun messing with Charles and Shaq, and see how it looked like they were there. Yeah, a lot of fun with them right now. But I think it's in the cards just because of the wealth of information that I have. That at some point, I think I could put a championship team together. I know it. I know who does it and why. Most front office and people, they kind of look at their team. They can't look at the league and the trends that's been set over the years and how they've been set. I've had the luxury to do that and get information from all of those general managers, all of those presidents of teams for years, and give my opinion to them. And sometimes they follow. So you see what works and you see what doesn't pretty clearly.
I'm just going to throw something in here. So 20 years broadcasting, this year is a big deal because the 30th anniversary of Inside. Is there any expectations you have going into the season? Because you guys have done everything on air. You won awards. You're in the Hall of Fame as far as shows goes. Is there anything that you're looking forward to, or something that maybe hasn't been done that you're looking forward to doing this season for the 30th anniversary?
We never plan it. We never plan it because, now I do a thing where I go into the screen. We never planned that. That wasn't like, okay, a year from now, we'll figure out a technology to go. It was just because we're into the game and we pay attention to the moment. And if you pay attention to the moment, great things happen. If you try to plan for the moment, it doesn't sometime in television. So we just pay attention. That's the key for me, is to always pay attention to what's going on. And I was describing the play, and I was sitting there with Shaquille O'Neal, and I was talking to our producer, and I was like, I'm going to do this play. And I said, it would be better if I could, instead of being on the floor, show it. And then Shaq was like, yeah, poke the guys. Should jump into the television. And I was like, right. I go onto the TV, and then I said, can you do it? He's like, yeah, we could do that. We can put you in. And then, because I have a television production company, I was able, they were like, but it takes a day. I was like, no, I know how to do that. When he described how we do it, I can't give the secret sauce. I said, I could do that. I've done that before for this. He said, you think you could do it? I said, I could do that in 15 minutes. He's like, no way. And so we set it up, and I did it in 5. Because I was already familiar with it. So those things only happen if you stay connected to the game and you stay paying attention. And now everyone talks about, when are you going to jump in the screen, Kenny? When are you going to jump in it? So we're going to do something this year that isn't planned, that, I think that will change television.